One of the other stories that's making news across our state this morning in the studio is Keith Henley. Keith is president of Mississippi Association of Realtors, and also Clark Wise. Clark is vice president of government affairs for the Realtors Association. Morning, gentlemen, one and both. How are you?
Good morning.
Thank you guys for coming in. I appreciate it very, very much. I don't know. There's so much confusion going on about this, and I think the number one thing to Keith, first of all, is just the ballot itself. Why is it that complicated?
It's crazy. It purposely is designed that way to confuse the voters, no doubt.
Well, I mean, but that might have worked in 42, but I think it might be contrary to the situation this time. You think it's on both 65 and 65A, or it's meant to be that confusing?
Well, probably so.
No.
Of course, our position is we're adamantly opposed to Proposition 65.
How do you think it's going to affect you, Clark, as far as what goes on in the state of Mississippi?
Well, the realtors have an interest in this particular issue for two reasons. Mm-hmm. Number one, we have a longstanding position that we oppose any legislation that would not allow a municipality or a city to zone as they see fit. And under 65, we have outside interests coming in and saying your local communities have no say in what their community looks like. Anywhere there's a CVS, there could be a pot dispensary. And so that's something we have a longstanding advocacy position on.
Yeah, would the city's municipality rules, codes, and everything else, would they come up first in this one as far as legally is concerned? In other words, the time that they could open or something like that, they couldn't open here then. Would the cities? Would you go back to the city's rules and regulations?
Under 65, it says they cannot employ any restrictions that are more restrictive than any zoning ordinances on existing commercial or
So they couldn't impose
industrial.
additional restrictions on them.
I suppose that's possible, but the way this thing is written and the way that these multimillionaires have crafted it, they are trying to be as airtight as possible. And their goal is to put as many of these dispensaries in our local communities as possible.
There's no limit on what they could do.
No, sir, no limit.
Is there a limit of next to a school? And I'm stumbling on here because there's so many things to ask you. But could you put it next to a school? Could you put it next to a church? Is that in there?
The proponents of 65A love to cite that, or 65 love to cite that they have these zoning regulations and 65A does not. But 500 feet is how close these treatment centers, as they call them, can exist between churches, schools, child care facilities.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Keith, would you call that a treatment center, by the way?
Well, you walk more than 500 feet when you go to Walmart and park in the parking lot to go inside. So, again, this is a smokescreen. You know, they're saying that we have these restrictions in place, but the restrictions are not what they need to be, and certainly don't protect adjacent property owners and don't protect the people in the community.
I know there is a myriad of things that's bad about this thing, and I think number one is that you're giving constitutional immunity to legal drug dealers. Sure. Is basically what happens. And that's never been done before.
What other industry has protection in our Constitution? Specific. Mm-hmm. You've got alcohol sales, you've got tobacco sales, you've got grocery sales, you've got gasoline. None of that is protected in our Constitution. Why do pot dispensaries need to be protected in the Constitution?
Well, do you think we hear people say that, we got 200,000 people who signed on for this thing. They want it. They know what they're talking about. But do you think that they looked at the consequences of this?
Paul, I can tell you we have polled this issue across the state. From what our data says, most people have no idea what's in the constitutional text. They haven't taken the time to read that 5 pages that they want to insert into our Constitution. And I'll tell you, as Keith has mentioned, this zoning is a major concern to not just our members, but Mississippi voters in general. And the second big thing that our voters need to know is not one penny of any revenue generated from this program actually goes to the improvement of our state.
This gets me, Keith, also because for some of the people who are advocates of this, and most of the people, I think you have a small number of people as far as the pain is concerned, and I can relate to that.
Sure.
We've had legislators on the air. We've even had people say that, look, if this thing doesn't pass, we may look at a medical marijuana bill, even though we don't have to in the next session. So I think we've had legislators who agree to this, that if you can use medical marijuana as a pain, but if there is oversight, then everybody's for that. That's why you should vote for 65A just as a backup.
Right.
But the other part of this is that for states to come in now, or some of these advocates come in and say, look, produces no ancillary negative effects at all, is ridiculous. We just got reports of, I think by a third, the increase in traffic fatalities in some of these states that have recreational marijuana. A third increase in fatalities, traffic fatalities.
So if that's the case here and 65 passes, we're not going to have any additional tax dollars to support our infrastructure or to support a
new Class 4 highway patrolman.
Exactly. So it's a total liability. 65 is. If you're in favor or on the fence in regards to the support of medical marijuana used for medical purposes, then don't vote for 65. There are other options out there, but 65, as we've said, we've got two principal reasons that we, as the Realtor Association, opposes 65. The absence of tax revenue for a state and the zoning, which affects adjacent property owners. Neither of those are good for the state.
I will tell you also there is, as far as we saw this in opioids, a crisis across the state, and that has to be addressed somewhere with some clinical help, with some medical help somewhere, and no money from the Department of Health can be used in that facet. No, you can't use any of it. The only way that they can use that money, Clark, is how?
That's correct. It can only go for the administration and promotion of the program itself. So we as a state could be sitting here with a $30 million deficit, and the Department of Health could be sitting there with $25 million in an account only to go towards the administration
and they cannot use it. But I don't understand that. First of all, how will they use that money?
It's a great question, Paul.
And first of all, can they put it in a bank?
That's an excellent question. I think that's something that the bankers would.
And who's going to grow it?
As a federally illicit substance, can these bankers that are federally regulated take that money?
There are so many questions on this one. It's just beyond me. But the reason we're bringing this to our family across the state, look, guys, this is like coming on your property, opening the gates in your front yard, walking on your porch, and getting into your house. This is about as bad as I've ever seen it. As far as any legislation in the state, and it's not legislation, it is a law that will become law, written into our Constitution. You got to wake up.
By their own admission, Paul, the proponents of 65 say this is going in the Constitution, so it will be as close to set in stone as we can get.
Well, the only way my understanding is the only way you can change this is with another initiative for the most part.
Yes, sir. And we often get asked about property value. How is this going to affect our property values? And we've looked at other states, and there are mixed reviews on it. But what we do know conclusively, what helps property values, improves our communities, is a healthy tax base. And when we have businesses and individuals paying taxes, that helps better our communities.
I was just thinking about this, Keith. Come on, you're president of Mississippi Association of Realtors. There are a lot of small towns in our state. We are a rural state. There are a lot of places where the commercial zone is not too far from the nearest house in the residential zone. So if somebody builds a pot shop a block away or 500 feet away,
well,
you can't do anything about it.
And as Clark was talking, again, back to the zoning issue, we have communities outside of large municipalities that don't even have codes. They're just they're unincorporated. So, we need protection, and 65 is not the way to do it.
More on this. A bank, $800,000 loan. Another bank, a $500,000 loan. Mr. Baumgar, $400,000. Mr. Baumgar, $100,000, $100,000, $100,000, $100,000. Joel Baumgar, $75,000, $75,000, $60,000, $60,000, $30,000, $30,000, $20,000. And the final one I see here is November 4th of 2019. No, that was somebody else. His final was August of 2018. A final $20,000, but I'm not sure this one's updated. It is interesting. There's a lot of money in this. We'll continue the conversation. I love this one. There is a very misleading ad on local TV promoting Proposition 65. These people are slick. Come on. I haven't seen the ad, but I've seen the literature, and we were talking off the air here. My guest, Keith Henley. Keith is the president of Mississippi Association of Realtors, And Clark Wise is Vice President of Government Affairs. First of all, the ads are misleading. Have you guys seen any of the ads?
They're very compelling.
They are compelling. You almost want to say, well, geez, how could somebody be so cruel? Will, have you seen any of the ads?
I have not seen any of them yet.
It's almost like, how could you possibly be so cruel not to want this for Aunt Mamie or somebody? It's crazy. But the other part of this is they are misleading, and the literature is even worse than that.
It is.
And if these people, and I said it on the air, if these people are that conniving on the way they're trying to trick you there, do you want these people to be reshaping the Constitution of this state? And you got to think about that. I don't think you would want them quoting you a price on your roof. But I want to go back to this because it is misleading and intentionally so the way this thing is written. We talked about it, Will and I were talking on the air about it. It doesn't specifically say at the beginning of this thing, do you want medical marijuana in Mississippi or not? Clark, can you explain that?
Sure. So when our voters go into the ballot, they get to choose a lot of things. They select our president, our senator, congressman, Supreme Court. Some people have special elections. And then you get to that back page, and you have several ballot initiatives.
And you're ready to leave.
Yes, sir. When you look at that half of a page that's dedicated to ballot measure 1, it provides a fiscal note from the budget office. It provides details. It does not contain the constitutional language, so voters actually aren't going to see what they're going to be putting in our Constitution if they approve it. But the only question they're asked is, should Mississippi allow qualified patients with debilitating medical conditions as certified by Mississippi licensed physicians to use medical marijuana?
And there's a yes or no check there?
They also get to decide, they see 65A. Shall Mississippi establish a program to allow the medical use of marijuana products by qualified patients with debilitating medical conditions? And then you have to select, I'm for one of those or I'm against one of them, either or both. So,
but if you choose both,
then you would have to go down and select which one of those two you want for our state. Now, both of these go in the Constitution. So let's say we have 1 million voters cast their ballot. If 50% of the people have to decide whether they want marijuana or they don't, they're for it or against it. Once they get to that point, 40% of the overall voters, so 400,000 people, have to pick between 65 or 65A.
If you had 1 million people.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And if you don't reach that 40% threshold, it doesn't matter if one of these gets 99% of the vote. It's thrown out.
The timetable on doing this, is it specified in either 65 or 65A?
65 does have, I think it's August 2021, and 65A does not. And I think part of the reason the legislature did that was to provide for additional studies and implementation. And this is going in in this case, it's going in the Constitution. It's as close to set in stone as we get. They want to make sure they get it as right as possible.
Keith?
It's scary. I mean, again, I go back to why does this need to be protected? Why does this industry need to be protected in the Constitution? The industry that is not providing revenue to our communities, to our citizens, to our infrastructure, where does the money go?
Yeah.
Where does the money come from that's supporting this initiative? It's
we know that there are going to be some negative consequences, no matter what it is. If we were doing alcohol, it's going to be
right.
For the first time. We've seen this with opioids, the problems we've had in opioids. We've seen it with vaping. We saw it with synthetic products, and there are always problems out there. They have to be addressed, and they're going to be addressed by the state. From meth, picking up kids out of the house. Highway patrolman or the local sheriff department calling. There are so many things that happen from this. Let's say accidental overdoses. Kids get a hold of some of this stuff, whatever it happens to be. And it's going to be put on the taxpayers no matter where you are in the state. But we got to draw from the general fund to do this. We can't touch that money that's sitting in the cash pot over at the Department of Health.
That's right, Paul. In Section 6 of this constitutional language, there is a sentence that reads, money in this fund shall not revert to the general fund.
Yeah. Here's what I love, and I didn't know this. Clark just told me this. That also in here, what is it? What section code is it?
Section 6.
Section 6. You'll love this. Mm-hmm. You and I got to pay $2.5 million. We're loaning them $2.5 million from the general fund?
That's right.
They wrote this in there?
The program starts out with a $2.5 million loan from the budget contingency fund, so our rainy day fund.
So we're taking $2.5 million of our rainy day fund to fund this thing. So we're kind of drug dealers in a way. That is just absolutely amazing. I think the thing that municipalities are going to regret on this one, if they don't stand up and the mayors and everybody else has got to do this, is the zoning is going to be a nightmare. And I know that's one of the reasons that you guys are worried about this, Keith.
It's going to handcuff the local municipalities. They're not going to have the influence. They're not going to have the control that they should and that they deserve. So, they're not going to have the control. So it's going to, these dispensaries are going to be able to locate, pretty much wherever they want to. So that's not good. Well, what about adjacent property owners? What about your neighborhoods? Those values could be negatively affected as well.
Section 2, except as otherwise provided for in this article, a physician shall not be subject to criminal or civil sanction solely for issuing a physician certification to a person diagnosed with a debilitating medical condition. That is a flexible definition there. There are no specific criteria that a doctor will use to certify somebody. There's nothing written in stone, is it?
No, sir.
The current language will basically permit carte blanche issuance of a medical marijuana card. Physicians cannot legally prescribe marijuana, as it is illegally a controlled substance under federal law, and there is no FDA-approved medical marijuana nor dosing guidelines. So if somebody overdoses, the doctor's not responsible.
Paul, this entire initiative, and we were talking about this off the air, and Keith can talk about this, be far more articulated than I can. Mm-hmm. In real estate industry, the contracts matter, the terms matter. And in this instance, the bottom line that the 65 folks want to talk about is we want to help people who are experiencing debilitating medical conditions or suffering. But the terms of that agreement are pretty severe for the state of Mississippi. And that's what we want to do, is draw attention to those terms.
Keith?
They're not talking about the terms. Again, it's the proponents for 65. They're playing the sympathetic card. They've got the compelling advertisements, but they're not talking about the terms. Handcuffing the local municipalities, rewriting the Constitution, and not providing revenue for services that all of the other industries provide.
I love this in Section 3. Require accommodations for the use of medical marijuana or require any on-site use of medical marijuana in any public or private correctional institution, detention center, facility, or place of education or employment. This does not forbid the use in these locations. It only states that the accommodations are not required at these locations. One can smoke marijuana and then enter these places in a decreased mental or physical condition, school children as well, and this is readily available to read in Section D of Section 3, Paragraph D. This is crazy. This is when you have the fox writing the rules of the henhouse. And then we got to pay $2.5 million for them to implement it.
That's exactly right. And as we said in our press release yesterday, we've got this multi-million-dollar industry coming in here and insulating themselves. And that's just not something as Mississippi Realtors
would you guys say that if the objective on this one is actually, if someone is terminal, if someone has a debilitating condition, that you could utilize whatever the attributes are of marijuana, then you would be comfortable with the legislature putting those rules and set forth in 65A?
That's the venue to accomplish that.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you, because somebody says, well, they won't let you smoke it. Well, I don't think that's determined yet because they haven't made the rules and regulations unless you're terminal. If a doctor specifies that if you want to smoke it and he says it's okay, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But again, you got to go through the physician to get there.
That's right.
So, but all of those things will be worked out through the legislative process. Zoning, where the money goes, putting forth programs that will address any negative effects from that. and doing it the right way, like we did casinos.
That's right.
Well, you get your final thoughts when we come back. Gore. In the studio, it is Keith Henley. Keith is the president of Mississippi Association of Realtors, and again, Clark Wise, the vice president of government affairs. I did mention that a kid could overdose on this thing, and then we have the plethora of people saying you cannot possibly overdose on marijuana. And I'm thinking if a 3-year-old got about 4.5 cookies or a sack of gummy bears, would you call it overdose or poisoning, or what would you call that? If a child is terribly sick and in danger of dying, would that child, would you not call that overdosing?
I think you could classify that as an overdose.
Yeah. You could overdose drinking too much milk.
Sure.
In a way. But your final thoughts on this one, Clark, first of all, because one of the things, too, that I wanted to talk about is we have a lot of questions on this, and people don't understand it because they think, and we had somebody on C-Spire text line, that you're going to get this out of a bag of medically approved marijuana, which is a fallacy.
That's right. And I often ask the people the question, the proponents, tell me the difference between marijuana and medical marijuana. Mm-hmm. And I'm still waiting to have a satisfactory answer provided because they want the protections that come with certain medicines, but they don't want the regulations that come with those protections. So that's number one. And my final thought would be from a realtor's position, this is a concern to us. The zoning issue is of critical importance to all Mississippians. We love to say that we're property professionals and community champions, and part of what we do as those property professionals is we make sure individuals have the ability to have a say in what their community looks like, and 65 fundamentally takes away that right.
The other part of this, too, is that I'm going to go back to the medical marijuana part of this, because a truck could deliver a ton of marijuana to one state that's recreational and then say thank you and head to Mississippi and deliver the other half of it. So it's going to be at the same stock. Right. There's no such thing as a medical marijuana. It's like somebody mentioned yesterday on the air, medical alcohol. There's none. The second part of that is the the marijuana that we're producing now is a far cry from what we had 20, 30 years ago. Right. As far as its strength is concerned.
Right. Again, our position, and I want to keep pounding this home, is we're opposed to 65, and we're opposed to it because of two things. One, because of the adding the handcuffing our local municipalities so that they can't regulate the location, they can't regulate the business. And then the second part is that we Mississippians are getting shortchanged, no pun intended, because we're not getting the revenue, the sales revenue off of the product. And what service in the state is allowed to come in and operate free without paying its fair share of revenue taxes?
You can go back to the analogy for the casinos that we talked about all the time, but you could also go back to the revenue part of that. Is if the revenue produced by the casinos could only be used to regulate the casinos, I mean, why have the casinos? Because it's a negative, an outlet is negative as far as the money coming in. So I always say this, and we have to kind of get this out to the people, that you got to vote no. And is that issue 1 or ballot 1, or how's that specified on there?
It says ballot measure 1. Ballot
measure 1. And you got to put the second one, I guess that would be over to the right side of it?
It'll be on the left side of your ballot, Paul. On the other side, we'll have the Electoral College for our state and the flag. But the left side will be all marijuana.
So it would be ballot issue 1?
Ballot measure 1.
Ballot measure 1, and you got to vote no on that. And then go down where it says 65 or 65A and hit 65A. Just as a backup. I say 65A is a smarter way, or smarter move. So just remember that 65A is a smarter move to do, or smarter way to do this, because if you are an advocate of this for pain, then you'll get it. Have you guys seen the polling data out there? As far as any of the polling data, because it looks like it's going to pass.
Paul, we believe, based on our polling, and we've done it both internal within our association and statewide, there absolutely is an appetite and understanding for medical marijuana, or the use of marijuana for medical purposes, shall we say. But once people learn about the details that are in 65, that number drops significantly.
But that's what this is hard to do. But we have to be frank with the audience out there. Look, guys, this is going to pass. There's enough people out there that's going to vote for this. we're seeing, 65 to 70% of the people out there, so it's going to be well over that 50.1.
Right.
So to protect yourself, you even though you're going to vote no, the chances are you're going to lose that. So you got to go down to 65A and vote 65A.
That's right, Paul.
So that at least that you'll get medical marijuana, but it will be done by the state legislature.
That's correct. It's critically important, even for those that may be against marijuana entirely. You don't just fill out that against bubble. You also need to fill out 65A.
And just to let you know this, there will be some slick advertising agencies and some good-looking ads to tell you how stupid we are.
But whether you vote yes or no, vote against 65. Regardless of which position, if you support it or oppose it, do not vote for 65.
Do not vote for 65, but do vote for 65A at the end of that or on the next column or wherever it happens to be. All right. We got more coming up. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
News.